2 sacrifices, 2 resurrections, 2 robot companions that step beyond their programming into personhood.
Mix a story with the laboratory, get a story laboratory.
The Iron Giant is a 1999 animated film produced by Warner Brothers Feature Animation and tells the story of a boy named Hogarth Hughes who stumbles upon a giant robot from outer space that has crash-landed off the coast of Maine in 1957. Determined to keep his secret hidden from the outside world, Hogarth must avoid being discovered by the government, and he and the giant both must eventually come to terms with the fear and paranoia that has infected the world around them as the stakes reach nuclear proportions. Big Hero 6, on the other hand, is a 2014 computer animated film produced by Walt Disney Animation Studios. Loosely based on the Marvel Comics superhero team by the same name, Big Hero 6 tells the story of a boy named Hiro Hamada, a robotics prodigy who teams up with a group of his new friends in the aftermath of his older brother's tragic death to face off against a masked mystery villain in a race to uncover the truth. His ragtag superhero team includes Baymax, an inflatable robot designed and created by Hiro's brother Tadashi to look after the safety and well-being of those around him. Despite the fact that these films take place in completely different worlds, they have some fundamental things in common. What we see are 2 boys that feel disconnected from the world around them in some way, and 2 robot companions that have affection for their human counterpart and behave with naivety and childlike wonder. On top of these similar character dynamics, we also have an important moment in both films in which our lovable robot characters sacrifice their lives to save their humans. If you stop comparing there, you can definitely make the argument that both of these films are trying to tell the same story. A robot who learns enough about life and love to make the ultimate sacrifice for his friend, right? But when we dig a little deeper together, we learn that while these stories are similar in some ways on the surface, they're actually very different underneath. First, let's look at a story device both films use called the echo, which is a line of dialogue or action that is repeated several times throughout a film, increasing in significance and meaning with each subsequent use. The purpose of the echo is to give us emotional checkpoints along a character's inner journey or arc. Each time our character interacts with an echo, we see that they've changed because they respond differently each time it appears. Let me show you what I mean. In The Iron Giant, there are 3 important echoes used throughout the film, the first of which arrives in the middle of a charming scene in which Hogarth gets familiar with the giant and teaches him some basic things about the world. When the giant insists on following Hogarth back to his home, Hogarth gets a little frustrated.
No, me go. You stay. No following.
The second echo is introduced soon afterwards, when Hogarth shows off a few of his comic books to the giant, who is now hiding out in Hogarth's barn next to his home. When the giant gets a little discouraged at his resemblance to a robotic comic book villain, Atomo, Hogarth has a few encouraging words for his new metal friend.
You're a good guy. Like Superman.
We briefly revisit this echo a second time at the junkyard, when Hogarth and the giant are having fun with their imaginations. When Hogarth pretends to be fighting off Atomo, the giant defiantly proclaims that he isn't Atomo, but something more noble.
I'm Superman.
In an unfortunate turn of events, Hogarth's toy gun triggers the giant's aggressive and destructive nature, and he almost hurts his friend. Here, we can clearly see that although the giant values things like life and beauty, he was designed for something far more cold and sinister, death and destruction. He's wrestling with his identity, and this idea of Atomo versus Superman really gives us a clear picture of that inner struggle. Our third and final echo is actually introduced by Dean, the laid-back junkyard artist that has taken Hogarth under his mentorship, similar to the way Hogarth has taken the giant under his. When Hogarth gets hyped up on espresso and rants about his school bullies, Dean offers some sound advice.
It's really none of my business, kid, but, who cares what these creeps think, you know? They don't decide who you are, you do. You are who you choose to be.
To connect the dots, let's skip forward to the scene where everything comes together and all of our echoes return. When the giant is finally discovered by the military, they use their firepower to attempt to destroy him. Shocked into attack mode, the giant's programming takes over, and he begins fighting back with all the weapons at his disposal. After an initial battle, Hogarth has a vulnerable moment with the giant, and tries to calm him down using the wisdom Dean shared with him from before.
You are what you choose to be. You choose.
This is enough for the giant to stand down for now. Despite Dean's insistence that the giant is reacting defensively, Kent Mansley, the Weasley government agent, calls a missile strike on the giant's location.
Launch the missile now!
Unfortunately for the people of Rockwell, while the missile will surely destroy the giant, it will also destroy the entire town and all of its people. If you remember from our last video, Learning Humility with Woody and Buzz in Toy Story, this is our all is lost moment, the part of the story where our characters reach their lowest point. After a moment of contemplation, the giant leans down to Hogarth and utters a few simple words that come rushing back from before.
You stay. I go. No following.
In one final act of sacrifice, the giant chooses to fly directly up toward the missile, knowing that he'll be destroyed for the sake of both his friends and his enemies below. Here, we again revisit two of our echoes, which culminate together dramatically.
You are who you choose to be.
Superman.
This sequence brings me to tears every single time, and that's no coincidence. It's a beautifully crafted and well-earned emotional moment in great part due to the masterful use of the echo. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at Big Hero 6. In this film, we'll also see three notable echoes that reappear at important points in the story. Our first and most important echo appears very early on when Hiro, our young robotics prodigy, is introduced to Baymax by his older brother Tadashi, who has been developing this huggable robot at the San Francisco Institute of Technology. Demonstrating Baymax's commitment to care for those around him, Tadashi lets Hiro interact with his newest creation. After a thorough evaluation of Hiro, Baymax makes sure that all is well.
I cannot deactivate until you say you are satisfied with your care.
Well then, I'm satisfied with my care.
Here, we can take note that right now, the only kind of care Baymax is concerned with and the only pain Hiro is dealing with is physical. Just as Dean is a mentor figure to Hogarth in The Iron Giant, Tadashi is a mentor figure to his younger brother Hiro in Big Hero 6. Our two other echoes appear in the midst of some important interactions between our two brothers early on. One of these echoes is introduced in a moment when Hiro is racking his brain for an idea that will get him accepted into Tadashi's school, where he could continue honing his skills instead of wasting them away as a bot fighter. Tadashi offers some encouraging advice.
Use that big brain of yours to think your way out.
What?
Look for a new angle.
Shortly after presenting his microbot technology in an effort to get accepted into the school, Hiro watches helplessly with his brother as the building suddenly bursts into flames. Driven by his fundamental desire to assist those in need, Tadashi has an intentional moment with Hiro before running into the flames to rescue Callahan, the professor who encouraged Hiro to enroll in the school beforehand.
Callahan's in there. Someone has to help.
What comes next is Hiro's Catalyst, the story event that flips his entire world upside down. After Tadashi runs into the burning building, it suddenly explodes, taking his life. In the midst of the emotional aftermath of this tragedy, Baymax attempts to assess what's physically wrong with Hiro, like he's been designed to do by Tadashi himself. Here we revisit our very first echo.
Let's get you back in your luggage.
I cannot deactivate until you say you are satisfied with your care.
This is interesting because we know that this time, Hiro isn't dealing with physical distress, but something much, much deeper, the emotional pain of grief. Remember that when echoes are used well, they act as emotional checkpoints that mark the change in our main characters over time. We know that Hiro's pain has elevated to a completely new level, and Baymax's physical assessment of Hiro is presented as silly here to highlight the contrast between Baymax's surface-level solution to Hiro's deep-seated problem. For our third use of this echo, let's skip ahead to a scene where Hiro goes on an exciting test flight with Baymax, who is now wearing his newly designed armor. In the midst of an emotional high point, Baymax realizes that Hiro's emotional state has actually improved.
I can deactivate if you say you are satisfied with your care.
What? No, I don't want you to deactivate.
At this point, we're led to assume that Baymax has made it his mission to bring Hiro back to an emotionally healthy state. Once that mission has been completed, he will deactivate. Hiro responds this time by explaining that without Baymax, he won't be able to find and defeat his mystery villain. We realize more clearly at this point that what Hiro wants, his external goal, is to find and defeat the Masked Man, and that what he needs, his internal goal, is to work through his grief over the loss of his brother. This third use of the echo is telling because it shows us that Hiro isn't ready to deal with his grief just yet. In other words, he isn't ready to let go. When our superhero team tracks the masked villain to a secret lab nearby, we learn that the man behind the mask is actually Professor Callahan, who was thought to have died with Tadashi in the tragic fire. Overcome with confusion and anger, Hiro overrides Baymax's programming, which normally compels him to help people, and instead forces Baymax to attack Callahan, who narrowly escapes. When Hiro's friends pull him out of his rage and restore Baymax to his original state, Hiro has an emotional moment when he discovers some video footage on Baymax's internal computer, in which we see Tadashi testing early versions of Baymax, and finally arriving at a good result.
Wait till my brother sees you. You're gonna help so many people, buddy. So many. That's all for now. I am satisfied with my care.
In this moment, we are reminded that Baymax is an embodiment of everything Tadashi stood for, helping those in need and risking his own well-being for the sake of others. Hiro takes this to heart and approaches their final climactic encounter with Callahan much differently. Our other echoes, which we heard earlier from Tadashi himself, are reintroduced by Hiro in the midst of the battle to encourage his allies.
Listen up!
Use those big brains of yours and think your way around the problem. Look for a new angle!
She's alive in there. Someone has to help.
This use of the echo is effective because it shows us that Hiro is not only adopting his brother's words, but his values. Making their way into an unstable portal to rescue Callahan's daughter, Hiro and Baymax reach their final moment of crisis. As they make their way back out of the portal with the girl in tow, some debris enters their path and Baymax takes the hit to protect Hiro, which shatters most of his armor and renders his flying ability useless. In our final use of the echo, Baymax tries to convince Hiro to let him use his rocket fist to propel Hiro and the girl to safety, which would also leave Baymax behind. Hiro tries to quickly think of another solution, but Baymax insists, using language that now holds a new weight.
Are you satisfied with your care?
Please! No! I can't lose you two!
Hiro, I will always be with you.
While Hiro and the girl are propelled to safety, Baymax falls deeper and deeper into the empty void. Now at this point, one could still argue that these movies have similarities that overshadow their differences. But let's make an important distinction. In The Iron Giant, Hogarth is the one who introduces the echoes that culminate in the Giant's change. Whereas in Big Hero 6, Baymax introduces the echoes that culminate in Hero's change. We're not looking at two stories about a robot learning sacrifice. Instead, we're looking at a coming-of-age story and a story about letting go. While The Iron Giant begins with Hogarth at the center, we quickly discover that the heart of this story beats with the Giant, who is born into an unkind world and must learn the beauty of life and the pain of death, the eternal nature of the soul, the persistence of inner darkness, and the value of selflessness. While Big Hero 6 builds to a moment in which it may seem that Baymax is making a final choice, it's actually Hiro who's making the choice to let go of Tadashi, who is now embodied by his robotic creation. For Hiro, physically letting go of Baymax means emotionally letting go of his brother after wrestling with the heavy weight of grief and loss. While the Giant and Baymax function differently in their story worlds, we can say for certain that each of them transcend their programming in some way and help us explore what it means to be human. Hey, if this is your first time here at Story Laboratory and you like what you see, hit subscribe to join the Lab Rat Pack. Thanks for watching, and remember, story is king above all movie things.
Do, 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 do.